We're with Camille Putois, the CEO of a very intriguing initiative, Business for Inclusive Growth, based in Paris. Hello, Camille.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you for being with us here today. Business for Inclusive Growth is a new initiative launched in 2019 with about 40 global companies, if I'm not mistaken. COVID came forward and it seems more relevant and important than ever. So Camille, why don't we start a bit about the initiative itself and I would say the goal of inclusive growth, which cover mostly things that I think are very high on the Israeli agenda.
Yes, thank you so much. So Business for Inclusive Growth was launched, as you said, in 2019 in connection with the G7 summit in France in August. And it is a global CEO-led coalition of companies fighting against inequality in terms of inequalities of income, opportunity, and geography. The coalition is powered by the OECD, and that is our strategic partner. And we leverage with governments to fight against inequalities. And we have two co-chairs, Emmanuel Faber, CEO and chairman of Danone, and Angel Gurria, OECD Secretary General. So why? Why did we launch B4IG 1 year ago? Even before the pandemic, we knew that inequalities were rising in developed countries, and so we had to do something. But now, of course, now that the pandemic, in today's context, we know that fighting against inequalities is more necessary than ever, because for two reasons that you know, but I think it's worth recording them. First, the pandemic has hit hardest the most vulnerable people, and second, Black Lives Matter and social movements like Black Lives Matter demonstrated the persistence of systemic inequalities, systemic discrimination. And so businesses with the OECD that joined the coalition think that business has a pivotal role in fighting against inequalities. It's not only the role of governments, of policymakers, it's also the role of businesses to fight against inequalities. And to fight against inequalities in changing their business models. And this is what is very important in the coalition. We are convinced that we can build a new economic growth model that puts people at the center. And to do that, we want to change business models. It's very ambitious. It will take time. It is a very complex task, but we are focused and we want to move forward.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And the fact that the decision was to, obviously, I think inequality, unfortunately, in Israel is a major issue as well. And the decision to call the initiative Inclusive Growth, connecting between growth and sort of, I would say, a better allocation of who profits from the economy is a move that suggests that business has a role, but at the same time, it's a direction forward. It's not just the problem itself, but also kind of a direction for maybe a better future in that regard. Let's jump right into COVID. As we've said, COVID has unfortunately shown and even increased inequality. The board of the initiative is about to sort of approve a roadmap for recovery. Could you share that with us, please?
Yes, exactly. So 1 month ago, less than 1 month ago, the board meeting of the coalition adopted a roadmap for an inclusive recovery. Before outlining the content of this roadmap, a few words about CEOs' engagement. It was very strong. We had a very strong engagement from CEOs at this board meeting. 40 members, the coalition has 40 members companies, and I can say that most of the CEOs participated in the meeting, and including the CEOs or presidents of JP Morgan, Microsoft, Crédit Agricole, Danone, etc. And why? Because the main topic on the agenda of this board meeting was inclusive recovery. What should we do with business to contribute to an inclusive recovery? And so the board meeting adopted, as you said, a very ambitious roadmap on inclusive recovery that covers, that cuts across several areas. But first of all, that calls for a joint roadmap with government and businesses partnering on a few key areas. Because I said before, fighting against inequalities is not only the role of governments, it's also the role of businesses. And that means that if we want to build back better, this is something we often hear today, if we want to build back better, governments and business have to partner and to define a joint roadmap. And this is what we said at the board meeting. And this is also what we push at the G7 and G20 level. I told you that the coalition was born 1 year ago in connection with the G7 summit in France. And we are in touch, of course, with the UK team for 2021 and the Italian team for 2021 for the G7 and the G20 in 2021. And it's very important for us that this joint roadmap on inclusive recovery be on the agenda of both events. So, what is this roadmap? It cuts across several areas, as I said. The first one is the future of work. The crisis. Because of the crisis, many skills are now obsolete, and we have to work on the reskilling, on the upskilling of many workers. And above all, we have to work on digital divides. We have to focus on young people. And so we defined several priorities, several priority topics for collective actions and to prepare the workforce for the future of work. The second topic that is, of course, very, very important in today's context is restructuring. Even major companies will have to restructure, to reorganize, to face the aftermath of the crisis. And so we are working on, we have decided to work together on guidelines. So what is responsible restructuring? And so we are working. So this work stream is led by Michelin and Unilever, and we and other major companies are involved in this work stream. That is very ambitious, but given today's context, it should be useful. Another topic that is very, very important for the coalition is, of course, diversity and inclusion. And so we have defined a roadmap on diversity and inclusion, including guidelines, collective actions, and probably in the future, several commitments. There are other topics I could mention, and maybe I could elaborate on them if you wish. Such as living wage, inclusive sourcing, and of course human rights, which is a very important topic on which the roadmap that the board meeting adopted define what we want to do. And just to wrap up, the idea of the coalition is the following. All the CEOs signed a pledge that covers several areas: human rights, inclusive workplaces, supply chain, inclusive supply chains, and impact measurement. And so there was a pledge, there is a pledge, and each year the coalition will define, will clarify, will detail commitments, will elaborate guidelines, will take collective actions, and will propose toolkits, etc., to help member companies to advance, to move forward to the advancement and the implementation of the pledge.
So that, I think, thank you. That definitely gives us, I think, a clearer sort of way to come out of the pandemic and the crisis, maybe somewhat stronger in the future, hopefully very stronger in the future. The focus, I mean, the three areas that you've mentioned, the first, the whole reskilling challenge, the reconstruction, the diversity, again, are quite strong on the agenda in Israel. And I like the fact that there's, from my acquaintance with the coalition so far, there's always I would say, the inner pillar of a company working by themselves and trying to boost the efforts on inclusive growth, but at the same time sharing the practice and trying to sort of maybe have a collective impact in that regard. One of the challenges that we all know is that the measurement systems for the environment, for the E as part of the ESG, are quite developed. I think it is less developed for the S, for the social, which we're discussing now. We have a rating system in Israel that somewhat tackles some of that, but and we find that it helps companies to move forward. So are there any thoughts in these directions with the initiative as well?
Yes, of course. This is for impact measurement, that the social dimension of ESG reporting and impact measurement, which are two separate things, are very important for the coalition. I mentioned the pledge that all the CEOs signed, and one part of the pledge is related to impact measurement. We want to advance impact measurement frameworks, methodologies, and we have a working group on impact measurement. We work hard with the OECD and academics such as Harvard, and so for us it's very important. It's part of the DNA of the coalition. And at the board meeting of November 12, we adopted the topic of impact measurement was included in the roadmap for an inclusive recovery, because we think that impact measurement is a key to systemic change. So first, regarding ESG reporting, as you said, the social dimension of ESG reporting standards is quite weak. And so we want, by our work, we want to contribute to give some flesh, to beef the social dimensions of ESG reporting. And so we welcome, of course, the current efforts to harmonize ESG standards, and we contribute to the social dimension of this work. And so it's very important for us, but it's not enough. It's ESG reporting, and I would like to insist on this. ESG reporting is only part of the puzzle. We are convinced that the key to systemic change is using more impact measurement frameworks to measure the external, to measure the positive and the negative externalities of companies' activities. That is the impact of companies on the environment and society at large. It's very important. It's complex. It will take time, but we work on this. We work with the OECD, with academics, and we would like to government and businesses to work on this together, because in the last few months, we saw very, very, very interesting progresses in the field of impact measurement, and the most advanced frameworks become very interesting. And so we are starting to make pilots. Some companies, some member companies of the coalition are starting to make pilots with using the most advanced frameworks. And we are convinced that in a few years, more companies, more businesses will be able to measure the impact of their activities.
And this is absolutely vital. Again, I think that this is one of the things that became even clearer during COVID, that we need some new measurements to measure the impact on society, to measure the impact on people, to somehow understand why we have such high levels of inequality and what can businesses do to reduce them and try to sort of level the field. I'm sure that a lot of Israeli companies would love to take part in this challenge in trying to solve that. So as we're sort of summing up, is the initiative open for other businesses to join now or in the future? How would you recommend to be sort of in touch and follow the work of the initiative?
Yes, of course, the initiative is open. For the moment, there are 40 member companies. The first year we were focused on defining the roadmap and building the pillars of the coalition working groups, because I was very quick, but there are 3 pillars in the coalition. The first one works on the pledge, the commitments, there are working groups. The second one is incubator, where we try new business models to see how we can replicate and scale up them. And the third pillar is a financing forum to channel more funding, more financing to inclusive business models, inclusive companies, inclusive projects. So it's a very ambitious coalition. First year, we were focused on building the coalition, strengthening the pillars. And now we are open to new members who are very engaged in inclusive growth. That means that we really want to change our business models on the medium and on the long term.
Fantastic. So we'll definitely keep in touch and help bridge the gap between the global work and the Israeli market. Thank you very much, Camille. There's more, by the way, about the initiative through an interview with the OECD, and there's one of the member companies, L'Oréal. So we'll share that. And thank you very much for being with us.